All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is the color wheel up at the top of our paper. And so for this, we might have to do a little bit of cleaning. So one, we're going to make sure that our brush is clean, so swish it around. And if your water isn't pure and clear, then you want to go to the sink, dump it out, and get new water. So sometimes I have 2 water cups so that I don't have to do that often. You're also going to look at the state of your paints. So if you have any paint at the top of here, some people have a clear one, some people have a white one, doesn't matter. But if you have paint at the top there, then all you need to do is take your paper towel and you're just gonna suck it up, and that's going to clean it there for you. If it's dry, then you add water to it first to loosen it out, and then just clean it with a scrub. Now the thing about watercolor is that you have to be patient with it as it dries. So right now my paper is kind of shiny because my watercolors haven't dried out yet. And so you have a couple of options. You can either just be really careful about avoiding this area, or you can go and like try to blow dry it. So you can literally try kind of far away, take a blow dryer and make sure that that's dried out. Depends on like the weather conditions of the day also. So careful with that. We're going to work at the top to make a color wheel, and we're going to do a 12-point color wheel. Now the easiest way to do that, I think, is to start out with a triangle, and that will give us like a rough size for here. So we're going to draw in a triangle. Notice that I'm avoiding the bottom part of my paper. If it helps you, you can just turn your paper around so that it's at the top and kind of out of the way of your hand. So I have just a loose triangle like that, and I'm going to draw in 1, 2, 3 kind of circles like that. We're going to turn this into a color wheel though. So after you have this triangle, we're also going to about halfway on each one. We're also going to draw in circles. So for this, I'm going to do a dotted line. Gonna go across, kind of make a Star of David. I'm gonna go down, so straight across from here. Notice that they're all across from each other. So do your Star of David. Then circle on the ends of those very loosely. And those are your 3 main colors. Or sorry, your 6 main colors, silly me. Then you're going to do one in between them all. And that's how you make a 12-point color wheel kind of quickly. I always like to start my color wheels at the top with red. It doesn't really matter where you go on this, but we are going to start with our primary colors and kind of move on from there. I also, if we're working in watercolor, like to start with the lightest ones, so we might actually start there. But I have my watercolors ready. Last time we were together, we learned about the 3 primary colors. So even though you have many colors on here, anywhere from like 12 to, I don't know, 18 colors, you are going to be using just the 3 primaries. So if you remember, your 3 primary colors are going to be red, yellow, and blue. You have 2 blue options here for you. Some of you will have 3 of them. If you have one that looks like mine, I like to go with the middle one, and that one's going to have like a more medium shade to it. So I'm gonna paint down so that you can kind of test out and see what those colors look like. So one of my blues kind of has a very greenish, like blue-green tint to it. So you see that very pretty kind of more teal color. Then this one's a little too light, so just automatically I'm not going to do that one. But this is the one that I painted initially, and that one's a good kind of primary blue color. So I'm gonna use that one. Depending on which one you use, you'll get different kind of effects, so you do wanna be careful with which one you choose. Like I said, I like to use the middle one. If you have different ones and they say which color they are, so I have like my transparent one. I tend to use the ultramarine blue, so that one over there. If you have the opaque set, that looks like this and it says at the bottom what they are, then I like to use, again, the ultramarine one, but it's at the top. So let us begin. And like I said, we're going to be using red, yellow, and blue. Out of your 3 primary colors, yellow is the lightest. And so I actually like to start with doing yellow because it is the lightest one, but on my actual wheel, I start with red. So we can already label these so that we have all of their names ready. So we're gonna start up at the top, like I said, and we're going to label that red. We're gonna go to red, orange is going to be next. Then we have orange. We have yellow, orange. Next over here is yellow. For here we'll have yellow, green. Doesn't matter where you place the labels as long as they're adjacent enough. At the way bottom we'll have green. So notice that green is going to be the opposite of red, just like Christmas, green and red. So that's what you should have on this side. Let's continue forward. So after yellow, green, then green, we have blue, green. Then over here we're gonna have blue. We'll have blue, violet. Violet. And finally up at the top we'll have red, violet. So please make sure that you copy the labels that you see here. As I said, we're gonna start with this yellow one, so down here, and we're gonna keep going. So if your paints got kind of dry, you're going to reactivate them. Again, we're gonna use the 3 primary colors. So that triangle that we have, red, yellow, and blue. So I'm gonna add a little bit more water to my red, my yellow, and my blue. So let's start in the yellow. We can kind of grab directly from the pan. And I like to paint down a little bit first on the plastic part just to make sure that it's all mixed right. And that I don't have too much paint and it's not dry. So you can see that it's moving around very easily. And I have a good amount of it on my brush. Now I can paint it down in that circle. So I'm gonna go over here and I will paint down my yellow. That's pretty easy. Now we can move either way through this circle and it's totally dependent on what you like. So I'm gonna move in a clockwise formation. So we're gonna go from yellow to yellow green to blue green. And like I said, we're only going to be using our 3 primary colors. So yellow, and we're slowly going to be adding blue to it. So up at the top, I'm going to make a pile of yellow. Just grab a bunch from there directly and make a big pile of it. Add little drops of water if you notice that it's dry. Now that I have that, I'm gonna add a tiny bit of blue. So I like to wipe off my paintbrush because it's like full of yellow paint right now. Just wipe that off and grab a tiny dot of the blue and you're gonna add that in there. If it doesn't change very much, then you're gonna go and grab a little bit more. So you can see that there's a little dot of like yellow in there that I don't really like, so that's why normally I'll kind of clean out my brush if I think I'm going to do that. So now we're looking for like a good kind of yellow-green color on here. So if you have a piece of scrap paper somewhere, then you can kind of test the color there. If you add too much blue on accident, then that's fine. You just wipe off your brush and add more yellow until it looks like a nice kind of yellow-green. And once you have that, you're gonna paint that down. on there. Should remind you of like baby grass. Oh, there's yellow-green. We're gonna keep going and continue to add more blue onto here. So take that blue, a little heavier this time, and add it until you have a good green. Honestly, either of the blues will work for this. The cerulean will probably look just a smidge better for now, but then when we switch to the violets, we'll want to switch which blue we're using. But again, doesn't really matter. So if you notice that your paint's getting really thin, that means that you don't have enough water, so you're going to add more in there. And then we're going to paint down where it's green. So it should be pretty different looking. I don't need perfect circles, so don't mind that. If it's very watery and very see-through, what you're going to do is grab a little bit more paint, so get it all in your brush, and remember you can just kind of dot in there to add more pigment without kind of scraping away the paint that you already have. Lastly, we have blue-green. So we have yellow-greens closer to yellow, we have green in the middle, and then blue-green's gonna have quite a bit of blue in it. So I'll try not to get my paint super full of the yellow, but see how that color is turning out. So really like a dark green. I'm gonna add more water to kind of loosen that out. A little bit more paint. Okay. And let's paint that down. So yellow, green, green, and blue, green. Now that I have that, I want a pure blue next. So I'm gonna completely wipe off my brush, get the water cup and clean that out. And if there's any yellow on your blue, you wanna like scrape it off real quick. Use your paper towel or your brush to scrape it off and wipe that away, because you want a very clean and pure blue. So kind of get it wet, use your paper towel to kind of clean up any extra colors that you see in there. And then go in. Again, you don't want to paint too directly, so I'm going to grab some paint and put it up there. And now I'll paint down a very pure blue. Should look nice and clean. That looks very beautiful. Again, I can always just drop in more color if I want it to be a little bit darker, but it's not dry, so it looks like a nice shape and my paintbrush isn't dry and leaving all these scratches anywhere. So now that I've switched to the blue primary color, I'm gonna head towards red. So I have my blue, I'm gonna create like a pile of it at the top, and I'm slowly going to be adding red to it. Now, if you have the pink color, you can use that instead of the red if you have it. Remember that we can also think of magenta as being a primary color, but I'm gonna do it with the red. It's probably gonna end up looking a little bit brown, so you might see me use the magenta instead. Just this red is a little bit like bright. It's kind of closer to an orange color, so if you don't have a pure red, then the magenta works also. So I'm making a blue pile at the top, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of red to it. Just a tiny bit. And like I said, I like the magenta just a little bit more. If you don't have it, you should be fine. Your red is a little bit better, probably. But they should be mostly blue, but kind of have a little bit of a purple look to it. So there is my blue violet. Next, we're gonna add a little bit more red or a little bit more magenta, pick one. So I'll be using a combination of both. Add that in there. Again, if it gets too red, you just take a little bit of the blue, put it back in, and just compare it to see that it's a little bit different. Again, if you have like a scrap paper that you want to test on first, then that works fine. And then I will paint that down. If your color isn't quite good enough, again, you can take your paper towel, try to like lift that up there and repaint it. Or you can just add another layer and that'll kind of adjust the color a little. Good. Next we have your red violet. So that's mostly going to be red with just a little tinge of blue in it. Take my blue again and just add that back in there. That might be a little dramatic. So this will look kind of more like a pink color. So the magenta works really nicely for that if you want. And let's paint that down. All right, we are ready for our pure red now. So again, just double check that your red is clean. I think mine is still fine. So I'll clean off my brush. Right now my water's getting a little murky, but I think it'll be fine for just this last couple of sets. But if yours is looking like really, really dark, then you do want to dump that out and get new water. Let's continue. So pure red now. So I'm going to grab directly from here, make sure that it's watery so I can see that it's kind of dry. So adding a little bit more water and going back in with my paint. And compared to the red violet, this should be very bright. So if it's not much different, then you should go back in, maybe add another layer to that one where it's a little bit bluer. So there we go. So there's my red. And we're gonna head back to yellow. Usually I like to start with my light color and add my darker color to it. That matters if we're working with other paints, but in watercolor, it's really easy to balance. So I'm gonna wipe off my brush because the yellow is kind of sensitive. Probably gonna have to reactivate it a little bit. And since yellow is so bright, it's a little bit weaker, so you might have to use a little bit more of it than you think. So taking that, see how messed up my yellow gets very easily. And then I'm going to add that in there. So we want a nice red-orange color, kind of a darker orange. Good. I could use a tiny bit more yellow, so I'll just add that and then go over. Next we want orange, like think of an orange that you eat. So a little bit more yellow. Really want to balance that out. Paint that down. I would eat that. And then finally your yellow orange. So again, kind of get rid of that darker color on there. I'm going to scrape off anything that I'm seeing from the yellow itself. And this one should look kind of more golden. So notice that I'm kind of adding my paint into the corner of it, not the direct middle. Grab more yellow, careful that my brush is pretty clean when I do that. And again, this is a more golden color than we had before. Kind of looks like Sunny D. All right, so there is your color wheel. Now before you close out your paints, you want to clean this out while it's still wet. So I'm just going to scrub there a little bit, careful that you don't get it all over your paper now that it's nice. And then then take my paper towel and just give that a clean wipe. So, should be good to go. See all my colors, nice and easy. If they're wet, then you can let them like stay open and dry them. But that should be good. So we'll wait for this to kind of dry and then we'll do some more labeling on it. What we really want to differentiate is the 3 primary colors. I'm going to do that with this kind of hard line here. And then my other colors are going to be the secondary ones. And I'm going to dotted line those. So the 3 primary colors, we're going to differentiate those with a line. Those are primary. And then the dotted one is going to be secondary. All the ones in between there are going to be tertiary. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, red, violet. And that is your color wheel. So please make sure it looks like this. Add those little labels at the bottom so you know what your primary and secondary colors are. And set this aside somewhere where it can dry.